27th of January. I'm going to get the date right one of these days. I'm Stephen Ridgway. There's an interesting article from Malwarebytes that I came across, which demonstrates how hijackers are taking over WhatsApp accounts whilst the user is asleep or offline or otherwise, in flight mode or whatever it may be. It's an interesting, very simple but interesting attack. Basically, when you go to log on to your WhatsApp account, you will be sent, or as part of that, you can be sent an SMS with a PIN number. And the PIN number is tied to the phone number of the account. Okay, logical. So, no, before you start thinking along the lines of SIM swapping and other things, no, it's even more simple. It's far more simple than that. If the user isn't available, they won't get notified. So if you're asleep or you've got notifications off or whatever it would be, you don't know that there's a suspicious logon attempt. The attacker then tells WhatsApp that the SMS didn't arrive and asks for verification by phone call. Okay. Now, as the account owner is, in this scenario, asleep on a plane, whatever, and can't pick up the call goes through to that number's voicemail. So by knowing the target's phone number, which isn't difficult to discover, if you are determined to do this sort of stuff, finding a phone number is not going to be beyond you. And then using common PIN codes for voicemail, they can access the voicemail. So here we are. This is another voicemail hacking attack. People will remember, I'm sure, from a few years ago, a whole load of celebrities had their voicemail hacked by journalists in order to get salacious gossip and so on and so forth. So if the attacker does manage to guess the PIN, they then have got access to the code that allows log on to the WhatsApp account. Now, interestingly, that works with WhatsApp, and the Malwarebytes article talks specifically about WhatsApp. But the same attack would work on any service where receiving a phone call with the PIN code is an option. And there are quite a lot of those. Certainly a lot of the sort of messaging and social media type applications can give you the option if if the SMS doesn't arrive, verify by phone call. So what can you do about that? Well, two things really. No, it isn't. Don't sleep, although that would be fairly useful. But so 2FA, and we talk a lot about 2FA. 2FA, not the panacea to all ills in the arena of authentication, but certainly makes this sort of attack much, much harder. So use 2FA if you can do it. Using something like a Google Authenticator, Authy type app, something which has got a proper code rather than something which is sent to you by the app provider. Also, it's I think a timely reminder to secure your voicemail. Probably most of us don't really think very much about that. Set the PIN up 15 years ago when we took out the original contract with our mobile phone provider, blah blah blah. If you were with 121 and the default PIN code is still 1210 or whatever it is, time to change it. So yeah, make sure that your PIN codes for your voicemail are not easily guessable. I would recommend that they are longer than 4 digits, but even if it's if it is has to be a 4-digit code, then at least try to pick one which doesn't have, strings of obvious numbers, year of your own birth, those sorts of things in it. So something vaguely random. Lexmark, the printer manufacturer, has warned of a RCE bug affecting about 100 printer models. There's a POC, proof of concept, that's been released. The security issues being tracked as CVE 2023 23560 and has a severity rating of 9. It's a server-side request forgery vulnerability in the web services feature of the Lexmark devices. The Lexmark says at the moment they're not aware of the bugs being actively exploited. However, if there is POC code out there, they will be actively exploited very quickly. So, firmware check required if you are using Lexmark printers. Anything with firmware 081.233 or below is vulnerable, regardless. They have letter codings and other bits and pieces, but regardless of the letter coding, if the numeric part of the firmware is 081.233 or lower, you're vulnerable. So you need to move to 081.234 or later. So that is something to look at. Yet people forget IoT devices, printers, and so on and so forth can actually be very useful in an attack, certainly for sort of lateral movement, hanging around unrecognized. These devices don't run malware, anti-malware protection. So, if you can actually persuade them to do something malicious, it's not, there's not much actually on the device that's protecting it. So definitely keep up to date with the patches. So researchers at the Avanan company, so Avanan is a research group owned by Checkpoint. There's a new attack that has been developed specifically to avoid detection by antivirus services, VirusTotal, and so on and so forth. The way it's done is by using blank images. So you get a phishing email. The phishing email contains a link, which actually in this particular attack, it's a DocuSign phishing email. If you click on the link, it does actually take you to DocuSign, so it does look like it's legitimate. But as part of the link, there is also in there a blank image file. Okay, gets a little complicated. They probably explain it better on the HackRead article than I can now. But basically, the blank image file, it's an SVG, contains code that will direct you to a malicious site from which malware is downloaded. So the reason that this, the reason that this is interesting is that because of the way that these things are embedded, so far most antivirus tools, most antivirus software doesn't recognize that this is a malicious or potentially malicious link, and therefore doesn't block it. So definitely one. I'd recommend you read up on it. It does take a couple of times of reading it to fully understand how that would actually work, but I can see that it definitely would. So what can we do about this? Well, other than the usual stuff around training users to recognize potential phishing emails, also if you can use some form of phishing protection, some of the major some fairly large organizations out there selling services. Don't recommend any of them, but SharePoint, Mimecast, those sorts of people, plus lots and lots of others. If you can use those, that's good. Also, think twice before opening attachments in emails if you're not expecting the email. So if you weren't expecting to have a document to sign, think twice about why you've got an email saying go to DocuSign to sign the document. So yeah, bear that in mind. And then finally from me today, the NCSC, the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, has reissued a warning about ongoing spear phishing attacks that are being run by Russian and Iranian threat actors. They are aimed at individuals in politics, academia, defence, government organisations, non-governmental organisations, NGOs, think tanks, individual politicians, journalists, and activists. It is at both groups. So what are the groups called? We've got them here. Seaborgium is the Russian-based one, and the Iranian group is TA453. Both are putting some effort into this. Is proper spear phishing, so they will appear to make themselves look legitimate. Fake social media accounts, network profiles, they're impersonating experts, journalists, and so on and so forth, talking about conferences or events and invitations to them. Once they've gained the trust of the target, at some point they will send them an email with a malicious link, and at that point it's the usual stuff about phishing, malware delivery. So be warned, be vigilant. Again, there is some protection to be had by taking an anti-phishing service. Other than that, helping users to identify phishing emails, and especially people who are in these sorts of organisations who may not, they're not. You don't expect your politicians or journalists to have cybersecurity in the forefront of their mind with the amount of day-to-day communications that they do. So, if you're supporting these people, help to, the usual training, remind them that they may be a target and that they need to be vigilant, and so on and so forth. Well, that's all from me today. Thank you for listening. Hope you have a great weekend, and I will speak to you on Monday morning.